we have here with us Tiffany Smith. About you introducing yourself. I'm going to start off by you telling me a bit about yourself, what you do.
Well, I am a counselor currently working in the field of drug addiction, drug and alcohol addiction. I studied psychology in England as well as in Jamaica, but I'm born and raised in Antigua, which is a tiny dot in the Caribbean Sea. That's where I am at the moment. And growing up, I would be considered an only child. I'm the only child from my mother. And I did not have a very I don't have a neighborhood growing up where I had lots of neighbors and people to go by or to play with, that kind of thing. So certainly a very sort of isolated type of childhood. I had neighbors pretty far away, but they were much older as well. They were from England, so in retirement, going back and forth kind of thing. So those were my only experience of neighbors really. So my much of my family is actually in England, and so it was really a situation of me going back and forth to experience a little nugget of family life and then back to my life in Antigua. So that's kind of how I grew up. So I certainly took on a role early of being like a fly on the wall, observing everybody else in their system, especially when I would go to England and be around family and sort of, okay, so this is what family is like, that kind of thing. And I think that sort of observation personality became a part of my personality, which is something that is very useful in the type of work that I do, observing persons and seeing the dynamics between people and what makes people tick and that sort of thing, learning people. So I think that would be how I would trace my childhood into the work that I do now.
Okay, great. So you grew up traveling to and from to different countries and having families all over. Was there anything that stood out for you as a child when you see different families set up? What was it that stood out for you?
Certainly that sense of belonging, a sense of being a part of a unit, supporting one another, being able to laugh and having a deeper understanding one another. That would be different from relationships with friends and that sort of thing. Yeah, those are the sort of takeaways that I would have gotten from being in that situation and seeing different types of mothers with their children, how my cousin is, how they look at the world, being from England compared to, being a mixed, being fully Black compared to who's, all those sort of things, race and all those things came into the picture as well pretty early. So it was very interesting to have that experience.
As you say, you're a single child, only child. How difficult was that growing up? Because I know my daughter, I have a son and a daughter, but she is young and she keeps on wanting a brother or a sister and building her family. How is that for you? How was that for you growing up?
Oh yeah, definitely. I was the same. Definitely was trying everything to be able to convince or make something happen that I could have a brother or a sister or something like that. So that was definitely a part of my childhood growing up. And I guess after a point, you kind of just accept that this is what it is. And I think you sort of transfer, especially when you become that age when friends become more important, you sort of transfer that kind of bond to the friends that you have. So having, that best friend, those close relationships outside of your family became really, really important. And this is like a substitute sister, and this person is now my brother, and that sort of thing.
At what age did you get out of that wanting a sister, wanting, another sibling?
That's a very good question. I have no idea. I think it was a gradual process. It was a gradual process when I sort of shifted to good friends who were sort of, to me, felt like that role for me. And it just kind of gradually, the importance of that, became less and less. But I can't really pinpoint an age.
Yeah, so it definitely would have impacted on you, as you watch other families with siblings, and you wanted that it had an impact on you. But let's go back to your school days, your primary school days, just starting primary school. How was that for you? And which primary school did you go to, and how did you enjoy that time of your life?
Um, in primary school, there was a lot of bullying, and certainly that desire to want to fit in. Um, there were definitely some teachers of great influence during that time in my life as well. But overall, I would say that primary school was a good experience. I think that primary school was a strengthening because of the type of bullying I had to endure. I kind of just perceive it in my mind as a strengthening experience and definitely a good source of learning those social skills, which I was not able to get at home, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, you
and
mentioned.
I think for me, sorry, I think for me, a very important part of my growing up was the extracurricular activity that we became engaged in. We had lots of groups in theater, in music, and choirs, and all sorts of these different things that sort of gave me another type of family system, really, and a lot of interaction with persons that helped me to build up on those skills
So
so that I wasn't, deficient. Mhm.
let's dive into that a bit more. You said, those things help you to develop those skills. What skills do you have now, or do you use now that you think these were back from, I learned these from my primary school days?
I think I think I have broader shoulders, like certain remarks or criticisms about me as a person, etc. I think that I have broader shoulders to be able to kind of take that and roll with it in a positive way rather than, taking things as personally as I could, you know, something along those lines.
So I know you sing and you act and you do drama.
Mhm.
Did you hone those skills in primary school, or was it at a later time?
In in primary school, I did drama. I liked singing in primary school. But um, my tendency for singing was actually influenced by my father. My father was a singer. So I liked singing in primary school, but I don't think I was very good at it in primary school. But the skill for me came later on. I will say that in primary school, the bullying, etc., sort of made me a bit more timid to not sing for a significant period of my life. But as I became a teenager, a bit older, and I actually went to voice training class, and then I started to get into choirs and so on. That was later on in my teen years when I reopened that door and engaged with that skill again. So I still enjoy singing today.
So was there a teacher that kind of helped you through that period when you had bullying and been feeling intimidated or insufficient for any task? Was there a teacher that kind of showed you the way or helped you to develop those skills?
I can't pinpoint a specific teacher, to be honest, but I think that the teachers overall were pretty good. But I guess there's also that idea of being a snitch and not wanting to snitch. So all of those would have come into play where I probably would not have gone to a teacher as maybe I should have. Um, but nevertheless, I did feel that the teachers around me were good and supportive and gave me good role models.
Yeah. Um, you touched on it earlier. You said your influence of your skills of singing was impacted or influenced by your dad. Tell me about that.
So my dad really enjoyed singing. He was singing all the time. If he's driving anywhere, he's singing. he put on some song on the radio and tell me about the artist and encourage me to sing. So it just became something that I just wanted to do as well. I just want to sing all the time. Um, and yeah, so that's something that I latched onto. But I think that that's just something that I latched onto. Um, but less now than before. Definitely when I was a child, it was something, I needed to do this because my dad does it.
Was he aware that he was of such influence on your singing, or what was he just doing this because he enjoyed it?
Well, I think he was doing it because he enjoyed it. It definitely was something that he actually did for a livelihood as well. But I think that he was also intentional about influencing me in that direction as well. He thought I had some sort of talent there and pushing me in that direction.
So him playing music in the car and helping you is kind of the influence of wanting to see you do well in this field. Did he ever want you to follow his footstep into?
Yes, absolutely, for sure. That was a big thing for him.
How did you take that? Did you really want to go into it, or was it just hey, let me do it, let me have fun doing it for my dad, or was it for you?
I would say I was doing it for me and my dad. I think, however, that at a certain point, me not doing it was also my attempt to get back at my father if I was angry at him, that sort of thing as well. Mm-hmm.
So somehow it was a positive thing and a negative thing. You were doing it for one reason and then stopping it because you wanted to. So it had that double whammy thing for you.
Yeah.
So how did you get past that then?
Mostly in being in a choir group where singing was just a part of the routine. And that choir group as well was sort of like a family for me, and a real sense of enjoyment came from it. So I kept up with singing in that way.
Now, was there anyone else as you were growing up in primary school, moving to secondary school, or even your choir groups that you were involved with, that kind of impacted you or influenced you to continue with this or to go to another direction?
I would say that the adults, even in the choir group, the choir leader was actually a counselor, therapist, psychologist. And I had an older distant cousin who was also a psychologist. And those persons around me, I became drawn to those adults around me and wanted to sort of fashion my life and my career around those persons. So those persons became more of an influence on me beyond, the talent of singing, but beyond, what I want to actually do as a career. So there were definitely those influences as I looked at the adults in my life.
And when did you decided that you are going to do this career that you have now?
I was about age 15. Yeah, 14, 15.
So the adults impact and say, okay, I'm going to put all my effort into this. Was there anything in like society or, something that happened in your life or in probably a country or in a country, wars or something that have had an impact on you to make you want to do some things differently or think of life differently?
I think I would say the experience of being in one country and going to another country and seeing how they operated differently, that certainly influenced me to look at the world and my local society a bit differently as well. Certain things about, maybe how you carry yourself or how you speak, the importance of education. Um, those are the things that pop into my mind that I think were influenced by having that experience in my society and in another society.
Now, in terms of, you have had those influence in your life, your dad, your choir leaders and adults. How do you think you have used that skill or those things that you have gained from them to help others now as see the younger generation?
Um, so I just want to say that generally in those groups that you would have mentioned, some of the skills I would have learned are things like confidence, things like teamwork, things like resolving conflict, talking, social skills generally, making jokes, letting your guard down, that sort of thing, are some of the skills I would have learned in that time period. I think as it relates to my career working with persons, especially children, I definitely have a strong sense of mindfulness about persons existing within a system and how you relate to parents, or if that relationship is not good, that there's an adult figure that you can go to and talk to. Um, being approachable for a child to be able to speak to you openly without judgment. Um, those are some of the things that I transfer now into working with, especially younger persons, and relating that also to their stages of life, because the stages of life where mommy and daddy is most important, to where your friends are most important, and all those sort of things are things that I can definitely reflect on for myself and use that to work with someone else.
As I listen to you, and I'm thinking, as you grew up in every era, there is a celebrity that would have influenced. You had people have those wall pictures of celebrities on their wall, and look up to these celebrities. Was there anybody like that around your time growing up that you had, a poster of them?
No, I was not one of those teenagers at all. I didn't have any celebrity that I looked up to. There were certainly celebrities that I related to, but no, I can remember as a whatever age I was, having an assignment to do where I had to find somebody I considered my hero. The person I actually selected was my grandmother. My grandmother was the person, if I were to idolize a person, that would probably be the person I would pick. As
Why is that?
well, my grandmother is very jovial, lots of laughter. You have lots of laughter with her. She's very open. So she would be that person I would go to and speak about any and everything that was bothering me. She was very encouraging and supportive. And I saw her being that way with other persons as well. Sometimes I think that maybe even my grandmother influenced me in the job that I do, because my grandmother is a person that it feels like everybody comes to her to talk about things. I see that in her own home. People just come to visit her. They love being in her presence and they love just talking to her and offloading. And she's so very helpful and welcoming and uplifting in the sort of feedback that she'll give to the person. I feel like if she were living in a different time, maybe she would have been doing what I'm doing now, but who knows? But yeah, so my grandmother would be the person that comes to mind, not a celebrity. I can't pinpoint a celebrity.
Yeah, that reminds me of my dad or my mom. There's certain things that looking back, they were always the people that Christmas holiday, any holiday, that's where the family would gather. And I wasn't from a wealthy family, but that's where everybody would gather, if it's church or anything. So, was there anything that a saying or a word that your grandmother would have used that impact that you still have today that you always remember?
Yes, she would say, once you've done your best, it's good enough. So, whereas perhaps my parents might be more putting pressure on me or something like that, and I would get frustrated or scared about not meeting the standard, of not getting 100% on a test or something like that. My grandmother sort of took the anxiety from me with letting me know that, once you did your best, then that's it. It's okay. And that's always something that I've carried with me, even now in anxiety-provoking situations.
So there's those that one word would keep you going, or those words would keep you going for a long while, because as you go through life, once you do your best, you'll always have that in your mind. Was there any other quote, in whether it's been read or you heard from someone else, that you think stands out with you, or something that you live by? Do you have a quote or saying apart from what your grandmother
actually. Yeah, actually, I like a lot of quotes from Maya Angelou. A quote that's coming to me right now, well, there's one, Phenomenal Woman. That's the name of one of her poems. Another one, there's a few of them popping into my mind as I'm speaking to you. If you can trod me in the very dirt and I'll still rise. Another one is, people will forget what you said and people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget the way that you made them feel. And I think that that's something very impactful for me that I try to live by day by day.
And I can say, definitely, meeting you, I have that feeling that you will leave that impression. You make people feel comfortable and happy from ever since I've met you. So definitely something I can say, yes, you live by that. So you touched on it earlier on about those things that you want to do for young people. If you were to, do you think people are looking up to you?
Well, I'm told that, I don't, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I imagine, I would say so. Yeah, I think, especially if I'm honest, especially the young people that I work with, the teenagers, that age group there, I do think that they would see me as somebody to look up to as well. But I think that even in my age group as well, yeah.
And
sorry, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I'm saying, how does that make you feel? Does that make you have a sense of responsibility? Does it change the way you do things and how you say things, or is it just take it as in your stride?
I think in the context of my work role, working with young people, I would definitely take it as a responsibility, something to be very mindful of in everything that I do and how I'm phrasing things, etc. Outside of that, it's not really something that I think about very much. I just kind of do me in the best version of myself that I can be.
What would be the one thing you would want, or 3 words that describe you, or that you would want someone, I should ask anybody who knows you, what 3 words you think they would say about you?
I hear a lot of persons use the word elegant, or prim and proper kind of thing. I think I hear that one a lot. I think persons who know me would say I'm very down to earth. Another word that I would say is nice, kind, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that. I would say definitely down to earth. I've watched you on the play field, playing sports, and you're a completely different person when you're on the sports field, aren't you?
Yeah, I guess there are certain contexts when I become a bit more animated. Definitely, for sure.
Right. So we are here with Tiffany Smith, and we're learning about her life, the things that impact her, the things that have made an impact in her life, the people that have made an impact in her life. So we talk about your family, we talk about school. How about church, in a church setting or in other settings?
Okay, so I am not a person who really grew up going to church. Um, my mom had church beliefs. Even though she didn't go to church, there were certain things that we did at home that were rooted in those church beliefs. So I was influenced nevertheless with biblical beliefs. So when I actually was invited to attend church, started going to church as such, I had always identified myself with the church Adventist. And it just kind of grew from there. So me going to church was my own decision. I've always been going to church, me myself, just for myself because I want to go there. So it's very interesting when, being around other children who's just going because mommy said so, or the parents are dragging them to church, or, I grew up in the church and so now I'm no longer, whatever the situation is, that's definitely not my experience. It's always been me on my own making that decision, getting up. However, I get there, making my way to church.
Now, so you have, made decisions along the way that, it's just about you. Obviously, what sort of things as you grow up and as you have your family would you think you want to impact or impart on your family to what you have learned? So from what you have learned growing up in your family, what things you think you'd change or keep the same as you build a family?
Mm. Well, I certainly would want to keep up with going to church. I think going to church as a family is a pretty powerful thing. That's something I've observed at churches. So I think going to church as a family is something that I would want to do. I think having more open lines of communication within the family, working harder to strengthen family ties, have that family unity, unit sense of belonging within the family is definitely something I would prioritize um, more than what would have been my experience. Um, I think doing things together as a family, which is along the same lines, definitely doing things together as a family, whether weekly, on the Sabbath, those sort of things, I think are pretty important. Um, hmm, it's a very good question. I'm sure as I think about it, more things will definitely come to mind, but those are the answers that jump out at me at the moment.
Okay. I mean, we have talked about a lot of the positive impact that you have had in your life. What was there anything that, in the contrary, and anything that happened that has caused a negative impact and have affected you for some part of your life and even today?
Yeah, definitely. I don't necessarily want to, well, okay, I'll just say that there's definitely been generational trauma, which I think is something very common in Caribbean families. Generational traumas and things being passed down, things not being spoken about, that kind of hush hush um, mentality or swept under the rug. That's something that I do find myself doing sometimes, especially in my own relationship now, or in dealing with conflict or addressing certain things within the family. There's all these things to take into consideration because so and so didn't tell and so and so's not talking to so and so, and I think that perhaps the relationship between the different generations has been impacted by the generational trauma, and so there are tendencies maybe to be secretive or to just not speak up. Um, the tendency to kind of know but just hold malice, those sort of things are definitely things that I have to be very mindful and aware of because I can see them being a family tradition, for lack of a better term. Yeah.
And how do you think of breaking that tradition and changing that mode that we have seen? I know I can understand that in a generation or in a family there's always what they call the black sheep or something like that that has caused problems throughout the time. How do you see yourself making a change to that in your life?
Well, I definitely try to be open, and I definitely try to surround myself so that I don't get trapped in this way of thinking that this is how things are, but that there's a healthier way to go about things. I might want to be around persons who have healthier family systems as well. I think that that's really helpful to hear about healthier families from friends or different circles. I think that that's really helpful as well. And just really being mindful of, okay, I'm seeing this tendency in myself, being aware of it and trying to be more open and not be secretive about this thing, but maybe to come right out and say exactly how I feel about this, or even healthy confrontation. So it's not just I saw this thing and I'm gonna just not say anything about it and just stop talking to you or whatever, but try to make more of an effort in that area to change the tide.
Is there anything that if you could turn back the hands of the clock, you would want to change? Whether it is in primary school with family, with the tradition, or things that negativity impacted, what would you want to go back and change, and how? Would you do anything differently if you had a chance again?
I think that malice, anger, resentment was definitely a big part of my teenage years. You asked me if I would do anything differently. I don't think I had the capacity then to do it differently, but certainly I would have wanted to deal with things in a different way at that stage. I don't know, maybe I would have gone to a counselor or um, maybe open up more to a healthy adult in my life or something like that, rather than kind of keeping things in and carrying that around with me. That's definitely something that I look back on and see it as a burden I didn't need to carry at that stage of my life. But if I were to go back and be a teenager again, maybe I would do the same thing again, not because I want to, but just because that's the stage of life I was in.
And as you said, you think of what could have helped. Then, knowing all of that, what do you do now when you see things that you think probably back then would have been a problem to help the younger generation? Is there things that you have picked up because of that experience to be able to help this generation now?
Well, I think being a listening ear, being prioritizing, validating what the individual is experiencing, how they are perceiving things, why they're perceiving things, and really making a deliberate effort to understand where they're coming from is really helpful rather than jumping into trying to change their feeling about that because it's your uncle, so you shouldn't, whatever, that sort of thing. So really being there with the individual and making that deliberate effort to understand, validate, and then work through it in a healthy way, rather than having anger flare ups, or self harming, or thinking about damaging somebody or killing yourself, those sort of things. How can you work through this and use those energies, use those feelings in a more positive and healthy manner that will contribute to you having or developing into a healthy adult?
Okay. We're almost coming to an end, but I just thinking as I listen to you there, you talk about thoughts, you talk about actions and words and, feelings and teachings. Which is most important for you? Actions, words, teachings?
Hmm. So, do you mean in terms of the persons around me,
Yeah. Yeah.
their
What?
influence?
Yeah.
Definitely, I think actions will probably be at the top, and then words. Yeah, actions and then words.
So you spend a lot of time looking at the actions of people,
Oh,
and
for
that
sure.
make you decide on how much you trust, how much you learn from that person just by their
For
actions.
sure.
And
For sure.
who gave you that? Who do you think around you had the most actions that you learned from?
I think unconsciously, it would definitely be my mother. Consciously, it would be my father.
It's interesting, you say that. So you have learned so much from your grandma about how she does things, but your mom, you are consciously doing, unconsciously looking at her, but not realizing that you're learning from her, and then your dad consciously. So it's interesting that from different people you are learning so many different things without even realizing that you're learning that much. And how does that then
For
um,
sure.
change or help you as you go through life today?
How does that help me as I go through life?
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, I definitely am more aware that my actions, my words, how I carry myself are really important because children and people around me can pick up on things even when I'm not consciously, you know, trying to send a message. So I try to be mindful and I try to be more direct, have more of an open line of communication, more um, so that things aren't kind of up in the air about what does she mean by that or what this action means, so and so. I try to make myself more transparent so that people would know where I stand and have a clearer communication with me, establishing my boundaries and respecting others' boundaries as well.
Right. Now, as we come to that end, people will be listening to this conversation and, might relate to some of what you have said or, thinking about what you have said. What message would you give to someone who don't think that they're making an impact on young lives?
Well, I would say it's really important to talk to children. Really, really important to talk to children. See where their mind is at, how they are perceiving things, why, get their understanding of any difficult situation that is happening. You really don't want it to become a situation where your child is holding things in, seeing things and just absorbing things, but holding things in, and you and your child are on different wavelengths and not understanding one another because that comes out in other ways, especially as a teenager, from my personal experience. So definitely having an open line of communication with your children is very important. Being mindful of the way that you speak, having transparency with your children, very important. And your children are also watching how you relate with other people, whether it is other family members or your friends. Your children are watching and absorbing, and it is influencing their decisions, their outlook, and how they will be as well in their own lives. So I think it's really important to be reflective on yourself and to look for the areas of your life that should improve on and actively work on improving that because your children will also see that and it will also be easier for them to improve themselves when they come into adulthood from any negative behaviors that they might have developed along the way.
Yeah, that is so important. I couldn't have said it better because I've watched these videos where there's a video about a boy saying, "Dad, I'm watching you," and he's watching how his dad relate to his family, to his friends, to even strangers, and that's very important.
Mm-hmm.
To say that children are watching us, and
Mm-hmm.
as adults, we need to make sure we not just by our words, by our action, do things to impact the young generation and the young minds we have around. Um,
Mm-hmm.
how do we build bridge this generation gap that we seem to hear a lot being said about that? Generation gap with technology being as it is, and it's getting wider. How do we build that generation gap?
Well, I think that the parents raising children with technology, I think that it's important to set aside some time where there's just no technology and you engage with one another, have some eye contact, make some jokes, play a game, go outdoors. I think those things are really important for bridging that gap because sometimes I think that the technology is just fostering the gap and the distance between parents and their children or grandparents and their children. I think also parents need to make a conscious effort to not be judgmental. Set aside the judgments about your children and what they think or about what they feel and those sort of things. Set aside the judgments because that often shuts children down, I think, when they're upset about this thing or you shouldn't be upset because look, so and so or whatever rationalization you might have, it makes the child feel invalidated. I think it's important to set aside the judgments and just invest in spending that quality time without technology, at least once in a while, and building that empathy in your communication one with another.
Some sound words there, helping to build generational gap, helping to bond with the younger generations and making an impact. Tiffany, I just want to thank you very much for joining us on Impact and sharing your experience, sharing your ideas and your thoughts on this whole way thing of impacting others in our lives, in our actions. What is your parting words to adults listening to this now to make sure that they're helping the next generation to make a difference?
I think that it's important in your own journey to reflect on your own childhood, to reflect on those adults in your life, what has influenced you and the tradition that you've kept with you. And the powerful thing about being an adult is that you have the ability to make choices and you can choose what is healthy, what is to keep, and some of the things that you need to let go of and readjust or reframe to make you that better parent, better in all your relationships.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. We know we all have one of those people who have helped us to grow and to have dedicated their life to help our children. And I'm sure you have dedicated your life to make sure you're a positive influence on those who you come in contact with. So I just want to thank you for your time with us and thank you for spending this time with us, Tiffany Smith. Thank you.